So we know that the government is going to get rid of NHS England, and this is something that going all the way back to beginning of the Tory times, the coalition, I believe, was initially created. Um, this was something that we all was saying, this is like so that they can privatize the NHS. It did create a lot of duplication. It was really more for like say the privatize the NHS. Am I glad that it's going? Sure. But again, there are a lot of people in that organization that are going to lose their jobs. So I'm not heartless to that. I don't, think that that's a good thing. I don't like to see people lose their jobs. I would more rather prefer to see first and foremost, can these people be moved into, other departments? Can they go elsewhere in the NHS? I think that should certainly be something that should be looked at first and foremost. Now, I do know there are organizations in, of course, the NHS, which will, I think, try to do that. But how successful, shall we say, that will be? I don't think so. But we do know, at least, we are now seeing a lot more jobs at hospitals being cut. This is, of course, not frontline staff. This is not doctors. This is not nurses. This is tending to be support staff. And support staff are just as important as frontline workers, believe it or not. However, I think here the government is going too far and maybe taking I don't know, a machete to these cuts when in reality they probably need more of a scalpel to really achieve what they are at least trying to do under this. So we're going to read more into this in a moment, but before we do that, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there is the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link, there's the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club as well. So let's go on into this. So, hospitals in England could shed over 100,000 jobs in response to cost cutting orders. So, hospitals in England could axe more than 100,000 jobs as a result of the huge reorganisation and the brutal cost cutting ordered by West Streeting and the NHS's new boss. The looming scale of these job losses is so large that NHS leaders have now urged the Treasury to cover the costs involved, which they say could top over 2 billion because they do not have the money. There is also a report coming out as well that the money in redundancies alone to pay that money is going to be significant. Like I say, of course, these people should be, getting redundancy payments, but this goes back to what I said at the beginning. You should be looking, can these be people moved elsewhere? Can their jobs be saved? And I don't think we've ever seen so far too much evidence that there is an operation going on like that at the moment. So Jim McKay, the NHS England's new chief executive, told the 250 trust that provided healthcare across England to now cut the cost of their corporate functions, such as HR, finance, and comms, by at least 50% by the end of the year. But the NHS Confederation, which of course represents trusts, said that some trusts did believe that complying with this edict would force them to shed anywhere between 3% and 11% of their entire workforce. So again, still significant, even if you're getting rid of like just 3%, even if it's just like, oh, we're getting rid of 3%, that 3% could be quite a lot of people. I often don't like it when they use percentages like that. I always wish afterwards they would say, well, 3% represents this amount of people losing their jobs, 11% represents this amount of people losing a job. I have, again, a feeling that 3% is a lot bigger than they would like, especially for some of these trusts. So, if of course replicated across all the 215 trusts, this could lead to job losses ranging from 441,000 to 150,000, as they currently employ 1.73 million people. So, again, like I say, don't like this. I think this is being, a bit too dramatic. Seems to me that Streeting is taking, like I say, far more a machete to these cuts rather than I think what is really needed a scalpel. Because as we'll get on to later, you do have some of the leaders saying, yeah, there is some duplication, there is some, things and stuff that should be cut, but these cuts are going too far. And I think I'm falling into that camp as well. So Matthew Taylor's, of course, chief NHS Confederation chief, said that the trusts were, of course, being asked to make such staggering savings that they might not even to able to help, of course, banish the long delays patients currently facing for treatment. He called on the NHS to create now a national redundancy fund to foot the bill for the job losses because the trusts were already far too cash strapped to do so. Again, this is one of the big sources. I think, again, of course, these people should be paid, their redundancy if they lose their job. But are we trying to make sure that they're being moved into other areas? Is there other jobs they could go into in the NHS? Please, look at that at the moment. So his intervention, of course, came as Streeting McKay prepared to be questioned by the MPs in the Commons on Health and Social Care Committee on Tuesday about their plans. The NHS is, of course, bracing itself for unprecedented losses after their losses of jobs after the decision by the Health Secretary to abolish NHS England and cut a large number of managers. So again, no problem abolishing NHS England. No problem with that. But now it does seem that you're going cutting a lot of other stuff as well. Which again, okay, fine if it's necessary, if it's going to make the NHS better, sure. But can these people be moved into other jobs in the NHS? Can they be saved? If they can't be saved, then they absolutely should get, redundancy on that. It's a no-brainer. But is this too much? Certainly seems to be, as far as I can see. And it is, as we keep on saying, should be using a scalpel instead of, a pair of shears on this. So about half of NHS England's 15,000 strong personnel are set to lose their jobs when it is merged with the Department of Health and Social Care. The DHS also said that it's expecting at least some of its 3,000 staff, of course, to depart. A further of its 25,000 jobs could, of course, go to the NHS in the 42 integrated care boards, which again, good. I'm hearing that for the first time. That's good that some of those jobs are going to be saved. All those people are going to be moved into other ones on that. Regional oversight bodies that, of course, could employ 25,000 people between them. Again, good. So not all these jobs are going to be jobless. There will be, a situation to sort of keep those employed. That is good for those workers. Taylor said that health leaders must understand the, quote, troubling financial situation facing the country, and of course, the need to improve the efficiency where they can. They've already demonstrated significantly by reducing their planned deficit for the year ahead. However, the scale and pace of what is being asked for them to downsize is staggering and leaves them very fearful of being able to find the right balance between improving performance and implementing the reforms needed to put the NHS now on a sustainable footing. They have told us that unless the Treasury creates a national redundancy fund to cover these job losses, any savings the government would hope to make risk being eroded by at best and completely wiped out at worst. So hopefully we'll see that in the coming days, that they will do that, because that would make sense to do that. He said that, of course, the trust needed to be financially stable in order to deliver the government's forthcoming 10-year health plan. Some trusts are currently budgeting to spend as much as 12 million, making staff redundant this year, the Confederation said. But one said that they were not planning, of course, a redundancy program, which will, of course, be unaffordable. And will, of course, be instead used, of course, the natural turnover of staff to try and slim down. Sarah Woodward, the chief executive of the King's Fund, highlighted research showing that only 14% of the people in Britain think the NHS spends its money efficiently. Despite that, she said, the UK spends just 1.9% of its health budget on admin costs, and the sixth lowest of the 19 comparable countries measured. You need highly skilled and experienced people in key behind-the-scenes roles. Again, that is very true, including management, of course, administration, in order to enable frontline staff to focus on delivering greater care. Again, very true. The drive, of course, to raise the NHS efficiency, national politicians need to be very much aware that incurring the costs is not the same as increasing efficiency. Yes, this is something that often, I think, should be getting called out more. Just because you are making cuts or you're cutting costs does not mean you are increasing efficiencies. Sometimes that will lead to inefficiencies because you have cut costs, you have lost staff. So that is something that should be, I think, brought up more and included in this conversation a lot more. We're not only just here in the NHS, but in businesses and economies more about it. But back to here. So Thea Stein, the chief executive of the Not to Yield Health think tank, echoed, of course, this caution about the cost-cutting drive. She said there is certainly duplication and wasted time in the NHS governments, but the government needs to be very careful about what exactly and what gets cut. Corporate staff in the NHS do include digital specialists, analysts, and recruitment professionals needed to improve the NHS efficiency and keep wards staffed. Again, all that vital stuff going on in the background that we tend not to think about, does need to be done somewhere. Best it to be done by someone in the admin staff, not by a doctor, because he's got better things to do, quite frankly, on that front. But back to here. So the former, of course, NHS trust chief also added last year's disaster review commissioned by the current government noted that the cuts in the last round, of course, squeezed oversight bodies in 2013, left the NHS very short on capable administration and ended up, of course, being reversed. Wouldn't be surprised if this gets reversed as well. In recent days, the NHS Trust have, of course, outlined plans to shed hundreds of posts in a bid to meet what Taylor has called challenging efficiency saving targets for 2025-2026. The trusts, which of course the trust which provide primary care in, of course, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight, plan to cut 798 whole full-time equivalent posts, or about 7% of their combined workforce. They hope to save over £39 million, almost half of the combined £28 million saving target, the Health Service Journal reported. Similarly, of course, other trusts in Bristol hospitals intend to shrink its workforce by 2% in a move that could lead to more than over 300 job losses. Like I say, 2% sounds small, but the reality is that's 300 jobs. And I'm really glad that they put that. I always hate it when people say, well, it's only this percent. Actually, that's still 300 people potentially losing their jobs, of course. But I would like to think, or at least like to see, as we've seen, that those people can be moved into other areas in the NHS. That they aren't, so we say, losing their job. They're being relocated to elsewhere or put into something else. They're not losing their job permanently on that. NHS England told all 215 trusts to save at least 5% of the budget for this year through now cost improvement programs, amid fears that the service could overspend its budget by 6.6 billion. The GCHS spokesperson said that we'll work with the NHS to make these changes needed to get the health service back on its feet. We'll focus on trying to deliver for patients and taxpayers while also supporting staff. Our plans to bring the NHS England back into the department will, of course, eliminate duplication, freeing up hundreds of millions of pounds for frontline care and better treatment for patients. And again, that is true. Getting rid of NHS England is a good thing. We are, of course, investing 26 billion extra in health and care. And have already made progress on a mission to cut waiting lists, delivering an extra 2 million appointments 7 months early, and even cutting waiting lists by 193,000 since July. So, shockingly, when you put money into the healthcare service, when you put money into the NHS, it can do stuff. Who knew? Apparently not our last government, but there you go. Anyway, yeah, of course, I'm not 100% happy on on these cuts. The fact that they are going, I think, so deep on this. I think West Streeting, again, not my most favorite person, to be honest, when we come to this. I think out of all, like I say, the cabinet people, he's certainly someone I would, or should we say, I wouldn't miss, should we say, if he got replaced or rotated out. But we're not at that point yet. I think maybe give it another year before we see any frontline cabinet position changes on that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, let me know what you think down below. And we'll see you all next time.